The Dominion called it a gift. Captain Darius Cole stood on the rusted deck of the ironclad, hands clasped behind his back, jaw tight as he stared at the corroded metal stretching beneath his feet. The dim emergency lighting cast a sickly glow over the exposed wiring, shattered panels, and the skeletal remains of a bridge that hadn't seen a proper crew in decades. A gift, indeed. The Galactic Dominion had stripped the ship of anything remotely valuable before handing it over to humanity. No weapons, no shields, barely enough power to keep the air circulating. The reactor core sputtered like a dying fire, threatening to go out at any moment. A cruel joke, played on a species the Dominion still refused to take seriously. Darius turned at the sound of boots clanking against the deck. Malcolm Briggs, Ironclad's chief engineer, wiped a streak of grease across his forearm and let out a slow, measured breath. His grizzled face, lined with years of battle and hardship, was unreadable, but his silence spoke volumes. "It's worse than I expected," Briggs finally said. "I figured," Darius replied. "She won't fly, not as she is." The reactor's shot, half the wirings burned out, and whatever hull plating she had left is about as sturdy as wet paper. Briggs shook his head. "Hell, I've seen scrapyard wrecks in better shape." Darius exhaled sharply, turning his gaze to the viewport. Beyond it, the Dominion patrol ships floated like sharks in the void, sleek and bristling with weapons. They hadn't even bothered cloaking their presence. Why should they? Humanity had no real warships, no way to challenge their authority. And the Ironclad? They might as well have handed them a corpse. "They expect us to fail," Darius said. Briggs snorted. "They want us to fail. They want us to give up, admit we can't stand on our own." Darius turned to him, a glint of something dangerous in his eye. "So, let's prove them wrong." Briggs hesitated, then let out a low chuckle. "Damn stubborn bastard." Before Darius could reply, the bridge doors groaned open. Leon Vance strode in, hands resting on his belt, his ever-present smirk playing at the corners of his lips. The tactical officer had the lean build of a fighter pilot, sharp features and sharper instincts. His dark eyes flicked between them, taking in the grim expressions. "Bad news, I take it?" Briggs grunted. "If you consider flying a tin can into a war zone bad news, then yeah." Leon gave an exaggerated sigh. "I was really hoping for a working torpedo, Bay. At least, maybe a single functioning cannon. No? Nothing?" Darius shot him a look. "We make do with what we have, which is nothing. Then we start with nothing." Leon crossed his arms, considering. "I don't suppose you have some grand plan to turn this rust bucket into something that won't disintegrate the second we leave orbit?" Darius turned to Briggs. "How much power can we squeeze out of the reactor?" Briggs rubbed his jaw. "With some serious patchwork? Enough to get her moving. But she won't last in a fight. The second we take fire, we're done." "Then we don't take fire," Darius said. Leon raised an eyebrow. "Easier said than done." The bridge fell silent for a long moment. Outside, Dominion ships drifted like vultures, watching, waiting. The message was clear. Take the ship. Try to fix it. Fail. Accept your place. Darius straightened. "We need to get this ship running. Whatever it takes. Because if we can do that, if we can turn their joke into a real threat, then we don't just prove them wrong. We show them what humans are capable of." Briggs exhaled through his nose. "Well, if we're doing this, I'll need more hands. And a miracle." Darius gave a small, grim smile. "You'll get both." 3 days later, the Ironclad still barely functioned, but it was functioning. Malcolm Briggs had worked himself ragged, tearing apart what little remained of the ship systems and piecing them back together with scavenged parts. Life support was stabilized. Power levels fluctuated but held steady enough to keep the ship from going dark. Engines sputtered, temperamental and prone to failure, but they were moving. They weren't out of the grave yet, but they had a pulse. Leon stood in the command center, arms crossed as he surveyed the still malfunctioning displays. "So, tell me, how do we fight a war with no weapons?" Briggs, leaning against the console, let out a dry laugh. "You don't." Darius paced in front of the viewport, watching the Dominion patrol ships idly drifting outside the asteroid belt. We don't fight on their terms. Leon's smirk returned. Oh, I love when you start talking like this. It means things are about to get interesting. Briggs sighed. It means we're about to do something stupid. Darius ignored them both. They think we're weak because we don't have their technology, because we don't fight like them. But we don't need Dominion weapons to win. We fight our way. Leon raised an eyebrow. Which is? Darius turned, eyes burning with conviction. Unpredictable. A silence stretched between them. Then Leon let out a low whistle. Well, that's terrifying. Briggs rubbed his face. Let me guess. You have an idea. Maybe. Briggs groaned. I hate when you say that. Leon clapped his hands together. Oh, now, I really want to hear it. Darius gestured toward the tactical display, still flickering, barely functional. The Dominion built their entire military around energy-based combat. Energy weapons, energy shields. They've perfected it, which means they've never had to deal with anything else. Briggs narrowed his eyes. Go on. What happens if we use something they don't have countermeasures for? Leon tilted his head. Like? Darius glanced at Briggs. How hard would it be to retrofit the old launch bays for physical munitions? Briggs blinked. You mean projectiles? Darius nodded. Leon let out a sharp laugh. You want to fight an interstellar empire with bullets. Briggs ran a hand through his graying hair. You're insane. They've built everything to counter energy-based warfare. Shields designed to deflect plasma, disruptors that scramble particle beams. But a railgun? A solid metal slug traveling at hypersonic speeds? Their shields won't even register it as a threat until it's too late. Briggs rubbed his chin. It could work. It'd be primitive as hell. But if we can rig up a decent coil system... Leon was grinning now. Oh, now we're talking. Darius nodded. Get to work. We'll need something, anything, before they realize we're not just sitting on our hands. Briggs sighed, already heading for the door. You do realize this ship could fall apart at any second, right? Darius smirked. Then we'd better make sure it falls apart after we win. Leon laughed. I swear, if we pull this off, we'll be the biggest legends in the galaxy. Darius turned back to the viewport. His gaze locked onto the Dominion ships beyond. The ironclad should not have been moving. Malcolm Briggs had repeated that fact a dozen times as he crouched beside the jury-rigged reactor core, sweat trickling down his neck as he monitored the fluctuating power levels. The ship groaned around him, metal straining against forces it was never meant to endure. Every flickering console, every surge of unstable energy through the worn-out conduits, whispered the same truth. This should not be working, and yet somehow it was. A deep shudder ran through the deck as the engines roared to life, the ship lurching forward in an erratic trajectory. In the pilot's seat, Jax Ford grinned like a madman, hands dancing over the controls as he coaxed the ship through its first real maneuver in decades. The ancient thrusters spat bursts of blue fire, uneven and unpredictable, but they held. Briggs exhaled, barely daring to believe it. On the bridge, Captain Darius Cole stood with his hands braced against the tactical console, studying the grainy readouts with sharp, assessing eyes. The Dominion patrol ships were still maintaining their lazy orbits outside the asteroid belt, oblivious to what was happening within. The ironclad wasn't on their list of concerns. Not yet. Leon Vance leaned back against the weapon station, arms crossed. You realize we're basically flying a corpse we reanimated with duct tape and sheer willpower. Briggs' voice crackled through the comms. And it's barely reanimated. If Jax pushes those engines too hard, we're going to scatter ourselves across half this sector. Relax, old man. Jax said, his voice laced with amusement. I've got the touch. A sudden surge rocked the ship, and the cabin lights flickered wildly. Briggs cursed. What did I just say? Darius didn't flinch. Status. Engines redlining, power fluctuating. Briggs' voice was tight. If we don't stabilize the output, we're either going to burn out the core or rip ourselves apart. Leon turned to Darius. So, how do we not die horribly? Darius' gaze didn't waver. We need to fight. A brief silence. Then Leon let out a short laugh. Oh, fantastic. You want us to attack something in this death trap? Briggs groaned. This death trap doesn't have any damn weapons. Not yet, Darius corrected. A low beep interrupted them. Leon turned toward his console, brow furrowing. Well, that's unfortunate. What? Leon tapped a few keys. Looks like our friends outside are finally paying attention. A Dominion patrol cruiser just altered its course. They're coming in for a closer look. Briggs cursed under his breath. If they scan us, they'll see we're operational. Darius nodded. And they'll destroy us before we become a problem. Jax's voice crackled through the comms. Orders, Cap? Darius' mind worked quickly, weighing their limited options. They couldn't outrun a Dominion cruiser. They couldn't take a direct hit. But they had one advantage. The enemy still believed them to be nothing more than a floating wreck. Jax, kill the engines. Let them think we're still dead in the water. A pause. Then Jax let out a breath. Copy that. Cutting power. The ironclad drifted, its thrusters sputtering out. The ship's weak reactor still emitted a faint energy signature, but to a casual scan, it would look no different than before. Just another derelict vessel, a forgotten relic. The Dominion ship closed in, sleek and deadly, its hull gleaming under the distant light of a red dwarf. Leon's fingers hovered over the weapons console, but there was nothing to fire. No torpedoes, no plasma cannons. Just a handful of scavenged railgun parts Briggs had barely begun assembling. The tension on the bridge thickened as the Dominion ship slowed, drifting into position. They were scanning, confirming. And then, "They're charging weapons," Leon said, his voice quiet but urgent. Briggs let out a heavy breath. Well, damn. Darius remained still. Jax, yeah. Get ready to move. Jax didn't argue. His hands flexed over the controls, poised to act. Leon glanced at Darius. We can't just sit here and take a hit. We won't. Darius turned toward Briggs. Can we fire anything? Briggs hesitated, then exhaled sharply. Not in any way that won't kill us along with them. Darius' gaze sharpened. Explain. Briggs ran a hand through his graying hair. I can rig the reactor to surge, overload it for a few seconds. It won't be a proper weapon, but it might give us a burst of raw energy, a flash strong enough to blind their sensors. Leon arched a brow. And by blind, you mean? A full electromagnetic pulse. It'd scramble their systems, knock out targeting for a few seconds. Briggs exhaled, and probably fry half our circuits in the process. Darius nodded. Do it. Briggs muttered a string of curses under his breath, but moved to the nearest control panel. His fingers flew across the keys, overriding safety protocols, forcing energy to spike where it had no business spiking. Leon tightened his grip on the console. If this doesn't work, I just want it on record that I had nothing to do with it. Briggs smirked. Noted. The Dominion cruiser's weapons hummed to full charge. Briggs slammed his palm against the console. Surge in 3, 2. The ironclad pulsed. A blinding wave of energy erupted from the ship, raw and chaotic. The Dominion cruiser staggered, its hull flickering under the pulse. Lights across its structure dimmed, its shields shuddering as its systems scrambled to compensate. For 3 seconds, it was vulnerable. Jax now. Darius barked. Jax's hands flew over the controls. The ironclad surged forward, its engines roaring as it broke free of its lifeless drift. They shot toward the Dominion ship at an angle, skimming dangerously close to its hull. Leon didn't hesitate. He activated the only functioning weapon they had, an improvised kinetic harpoon, a crude launch mechanism repurposed from a salvage claw. The harpoon fired. It tore through the weakened hull plating of the Dominion cruiser, embedding deep into its structure. And attached to it, a makeshift explosive. Leon grinned. Boom. The detonation wasn't large. Not by Dominion standards, but it didn't need to be. It struck, at a critical junction, one of the ship's primary power relays. Sparks cascaded across its hull as systems overloaded, engines sputtering. The ironclad banked hard, narrowly avoiding debris as the Dominion ship spiraled, its thrusters flickering in and out of control. Briggs let out a shaky laugh. I cannot believe that worked. Leon smirked. You wound me, Mal. Darius didn't smile. His gaze remained locked on the Dominion vessel as it struggled to stabilize. This wasn't a victory. It was survival. And the Dominion would not take it lightly. Jax, he said quietly, get us out of here. Jax didn't argue. The ironclad veered away, engines flaring as they vanished into the depths of the asteroid belt. Silence filled the bridge. Then Briggs let out a long breath. They're going to come after us now. Darius nodded. Good. Leon's grin widened. We're finally in the game. The captain turned toward the viewport, watching the dying glow of the Dominion ship fade behind them. They wanted to see what humanity was capable of, he murmured. His fingers tightened around the console. The ironclad moved like a phantom through the asteroid belt, its patched-together systems groaning under the strain of constant course corrections. The ship was barely holding itself together, but it was alive. More than that, it was free. Darius stood at the center of the bridge, eyes locked on the swirling debris field beyond the viewport. The Dominion would not take their defiance lightly. The crippled patrol ship they had left behind was only the beginning. Soon, the full weight of the Empire would come bearing down on them. Leon leaned against the weapons console, watching Darius with an amused smirk. So, what's next, fearless leader? We find an even bigger target to piss off? Briggs snorted from the engineering station. I vote we don't. Darius didn't respond immediately. He was thinking, planning. The ironclad was still no match for a Dominion warship in open combat, but their last encounter had proven something crucial. The enemy wasn't ready for them. They had spent so long assuming humanity was beneath notice that they had no countermeasures for the kind of fight Darius intended to bring. We need weapons, he said, finally. Leon arched a brow. And where exactly do we find those? There's a scrapyard colony 2 jumps from here. Used to be an old frontier outpost before the Dominion shut it down. Now it's a black market hub. Briggs frowned. You think we can find anything worth salvaging? If we can't, we're already dead, Darius said. Jax's voice crackled through the comms from the pilot's seat. Setting course now. Hopefully the Dominion is still busy cleaning up their mess back there. Darius nodded. Let's move. The ironclad rumbled as its engines fired. The ship veered out of the asteroid belt, its trajectory locked onto a point in deep space where no official maps would ever lead. The colony loomed ahead, a sprawling graveyard of half-dismantled ships welded together into a chaotic, labyrinthine station. Faint lights flickered between the towering wreckage, marking docking bays where smugglers, scavengers, and mercenaries did business far from the prying eyes of the Dominion. Leon let out a low whistle. Ah, home sweet home. Briggs grumbled. I hate places like this. That's because you have a soul. Darius ignored them both. Jax, take us in. Keep the engines warm. We won't be staying long. The ironclad settled into a docking bay with a metallic groan, steam venting from its overworked thrusters. The moment the hatch opened, the air was thick with the scent of oil, burnt wiring, and the metallic tang of ozone. Darius led the way, his crew close behind. The station was alive with movement. Traders arguing over scrap, mechanics hunched over half-dismantled engines, armed men lurking in the shadows. Leon nudged Briggs. Relax. If anyone tries to shoot us, I'll make sure they hit you first. Briggs sighed. Comforting. Darius ignored their banter, eyes scanning the crowd until they locked onto a familiar figure. A tall, broad-shouldered man leaned against a stack of cargo crates, arms crossed over his chest. His face was scarred, his expression unreadable. Darius approached. Dane. The man's lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. Didn't think I'd see you again, Cole. You have something I need. Dane studied him for a long moment, then gestured toward a side corridor. Walk with me. They moved through the station, weaving between rusted bulkheads and dimly lit alcoves where deals were made in hushed tones. Finally, Dane stopped beside a sealed storage unit. He keyed in a code, and the doors groaned open. Inside, rows of weapons glinted under the flickering lights. Briggs let out a low breath. Well, damn. Leon grinned. Now that's a beautiful sight. Darius stepped forward, inspecting the selection. Railgun components, kinetic shells, even a handful of old missile casings. Primitive by Dominion standards, but precisely what he needed. He turned back to Dane. How much? Dane tilted his head. Depends. You planning to start a war? Darius met his gaze. I plan to finish one. A long silence stretched between them. Then Dane exhaled sharply. You always were a stubborn bastard. Leon chuckled. You have no idea. Dane ran a hand over his scarred jaw, then nodded. I'll give you a deal. But if the Dominion comes looking, I never saw you. Darius nodded. Understood. Briggs moved in to inspect the weapons, already muttering calculations under his breath. Leon clapped his hands together. Looks like we're finally getting teeth. Darius' gaze remained steady. Let's hope they're sharp enough. As the crew began loading the weapons onto the ironclad, a distant alarm blared through the station. Jax's voice crackled through the comms. Cap, we might have a problem. Darius tensed. What is it? I just picked up a Dominion signal. They're here. Leon cursed. How the hell did they find us? Briggs' expression darkened. Doesn't matter. We need to go. Darius turned to Dane. You selling us out? Dane held his gaze, then scoffed. If I was, you'd already be dead. But you need to move. Now. Darius didn't hesitate. Get the weapons aboard. We're leaving. The crew rushed to work as the station's comms crackled to life. All vessels remain docked. Dominion forces are conducting inspections. Noncompliance will be met with force. Leon let out a sharp breath. Well, that's ominous. Jax's voice cut through the comms. They've got fighters circling the station. If they see us moving, we're screwed. Darius' mind raced. They couldn't fight, not yet. And they sure as hell couldn't let the Dominion board them. Then an idea formed. A reckless, impossible idea. Briggs, how stable is the reactor? Briggs hesitated. Define stable. If we overload it again, can we create another pulse? Briggs' eyes widened. You want to EMP an entire station? Darius' expression was grim. It's our only shot. Briggs muttered a curse. I can do it, but it'll fry our own systems for a few seconds. Darius turned to Leon. Can you shoot blind? Leon grinned. Can I what? I need you to disable their lead ship the moment the pulse hits. Leon's grin widened. Oh, now this is getting fun. Darius tapped his comms. Jax, be ready to launch the second the lights go out. You're insane. That's an order. A pause. Then Jax sighed. Aye, Cap. Briggs exhaled sharply. Pulse in 3, 2. The ironclad trembled as raw energy surged through its core. The station went dark. For a fraction of a second, silence reigned. Then Leon fired. A single railgun slug, fired from a barely functioning launch system, tore through the darkness. It struck the Dominion ship's engines in a burst of flame and debris. Jax didn't wait. The ironclad roared to life, launching from the station in a blur of motion. Behind them, chaos erupted. Dominion ships scrambled, their systems struggling to reboot. The station flickered as emergency power fought to stabilize. Briggs hooped. We're still alive. Leon laughed, and armed. Darius exhaled, watching the Dominion ships shrink in the distance. This was only the beginning. Set course, he said quietly. We have a war to win. The ironclad hurtled through the void, its newly acquired weapons secured in the hold, its crew running on the thin edge between exhaustion and exhilaration. The Dominion had underestimated them once. That mistake wouldn't be repeated. Darius stood at the center of the bridge, watching the swirling light of hyperspace streak past the viewport. His mind was already moving ahead, calculating their next step. They had the firepower now, but weapons alone wouldn't win this fight. They needed a plan. A strike that would force the Dominion to see them not as insects to be crushed, but as an enemy worth fearing. Leon leaned back against his console, arms crossed. So, we're fully armed and still hopelessly outnumbered. What's next, Captain? Darius' gaze didn't waver. We go for the throat. Briggs let out a sigh. Why do I feel like I'm about to regret hearing the details? Darius turned, bringing up a star map on the holo display. A series of Dominion outposts flickered in red, marking their presence in the sector. But one point stood out, a heavily fortified relay station orbiting a barren moon. "That's our target," he said. Briggs frowned. "A Dominion command relay? You do realize they'll vaporize us the second we get within range?" Darius nodded. "Not if we hit them first." Leon grinned. "I like where this is going." Jax's voice crackled through the comms. "Coming out of hyperspace in 60 seconds. Hope you've got something brilliant, Cap." Darius stepped forward, eyes locked on the relay station as it materialized in the viewport. A massive structure, bristling with defenses, its communication arrays linking Dominion forces across the sector. Briggs muttered a curse. "That's a lot of guns." Darius' voice was calm. "Then we don't give them time to use them." The plan was reckless. Insane. But it was their best shot. "Leon, get to the railguns." "Briggs, I need you in engineering. Keep the reactor stable no matter what." "Jax, bring us in fast." The ironclad surged forward, thrusters burning hot. Alarms blared from the relay station as Dominion defenses came online. Turrets swiveled, locking onto the incoming vessel. Then Leon fired. A barrage of kinetic rounds tore through the station's outer defenses, shattering one of the smaller turrets before they could return fire. The ironclad twisted through the chaos, dodging incoming blasts as Jax pushed the ship to its absolute limits. Briggs' voice crackled through the comms. "You're gonna rip this ship apart." Jax gritted his teeth. "Only if I miss." The ironclad spiraled downward, skimming along the station's hull. Leon unleashed another round, a missile striking a power conduit, sending a surge of electricity rippling across the station's surface. Darius' voice cut through the comms. "Briggs, prep the EMP." Briggs hesitated. "You really want to do this again?" "Now, Briggs." Briggs swore but obeyed. The pulse hit like a hammer. Lights flickered. Systems stuttered. For a brief moment, the station's defenses went dark. Darius didn't waste it. "Jax, get us inside." The ironclad plunged into a docking bay, scraping against metal as it skidded to a halt. The ramp dropped before the ship had fully stopped moving, and Darius was already charging forward, weapon drawn. Leon was right behind him. "You sure this isn't suicide?" Darius didn't answer. The corridors were in chaos, Dominion officers scrambling to restore power, unaware that death was already moving among them. The first guard barely had time to react before Darius took him down with a precise shot. Briggs' voice crackled through their earpieces. "You've got minutes before they reboot. Get what we came for." Darius pushed forward, his team moving in sync. The command center was close. One last corridor. Then the Dominion soldiers arrived. Blaster fire erupted around them. Leon dove for cover, returning fire with deadly precision. Jax moved fast, taking down a soldier before he could raise the alarm. Darius didn't slow. He was already at the door, bypassing the security lock with practiced efficiency. The door hissed open. Inside, the command center glowed with data, real-time fleet movements, encrypted transmissions, tactical directives. Everything they needed. Darius moved to the console, inserting a data spike. "Briggs, we're in. Pull what you can." Briggs' voice came through, strained but focused. "Working on it. Hold the damn line." The Dominion reinforcements were coming. Leon gritted his teeth. "I'm running out of ammo here." Jax glanced at the console. "How much longer?" Briggs' voice was tight. 30 seconds. They didn't have 30 seconds. Darius made a decision. "Leon, Jax, fall back to the ship." Leon hesitated. "And you?" "I'll finish this." Leon cursed. "You better not die." Then he was gone, dragging Jax with him. Darius turned back to the console. Data scrolled across the screen, coordinates, supply routes, weak points. He copied everything. Briggs' voice was sharp. "Got it. Now move." Darius didn't hesitate. The moment he stepped into the corridor, Dominion soldiers were waiting. Blaster fire streaked past him as he ran. He dove, rolled, fired. One enemy fell. Then another. But they kept coming. The docking bay was in sight. Then pain. A shot seared through his side, the force knocking him to the ground. The Dominion soldier stood over him, weapon raised. Darius clenched his jaw. If he was going out, he was taking them with him. But before the trigger could be pulled, a railgun blast tore through the bay. Leon's voice crackled through the comms. "Get up, Cole." Darius forced himself to his feet, blood dripping from his wound as he stumbled toward the ship. The ironclad's ramp was already rising as he leaped aboard. Jax didn't wait for orders. The ship roared out of the docking bay, leaving fire and chaos in its wake. Briggs rushed forward, pressing a hand against Darius' wound. "You're an idiot." Darius smirked. "Yeah, but we got what we came for." Leon grinned, watching the Dominion station shrink in the distance. "So what exactly did we get?" Darius exhaled, holding up the data spike. "A war they're not ready for." Silence filled the bridge. Then Briggs chuckled. "You're actually serious." Darius' eyes burned with determination. "They wanted to break us. They failed." He turned toward the viewport, watching the stars stretch before them. "This is just the beginning."